All right, let's get real about this. Today we're talking about a couple, Andre and Leslie. Now, these two are deeply in love, building a life together, and they want to start a family. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? Well, here's the twist. Andre and Leslie are both deaf. They've lived their entire lives in a world that often doesn't understand their experience. And now as they stand on the brink of parenthood, they are facing a decision that most of us can't even imagine. They're thinking about having a child, and they have the technology available to make a specific choice about that child. It's a choice that has them, and a lot of other folks, asking some tough questions. Now, you might be thinking they want to use modern medicine to ensure their child can hear, but you'd be wrong. Andre and Leslie are considering using a technology called pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, or PGD, to intentionally select an embryo that is also deaf. Let that sink in for a minute. They want to choose to have a deaf child. This isn't some hypothetical debate for them. This is their reality. This is a real-life, high-stakes decision about the future of their family. They believe their life, their culture, and their identity as deaf individuals are things of value, things they want to share, to pass on. But this choice is tearing them up inside because they know the world can be a tough place. Their dilemma brings up a whole hornet's nest of ethical questions. Are parents supposed to give their children the best possible start in life? And if so, who gets to define what best even means? Is being able to hear automatically better than being deaf? Andre and Leslie don't think so. They see their deafness not as a deficit, but as a core part of who they are. It's the foundation of their language, their community, and their shared history. They feel a deep connection to deaf culture, a rich and vibrant world with its own language, American Sign Language, its own traditions, and its own unique perspective. They want to welcome their child into that world from day one. So the question they're wrestling with is this: is it more loving to give their child a life that mirrors their own, a life they understand and can navigate with expertise? Or is it more loving to give them a life free from the specific challenges they themselves have faced? This isn't a simple right or wrong answer. There are no easy outs here. This is a gut check moment for Andre and Leslie, and it's a moment that forces all of us to look at our own beliefs about family, disability, and what it truly means to be a loving parent. We have to break this down, because at the end of the day, a child's future is on the line. Let's talk about the science here, because you can't understand their choice without understanding the tool they're thinking of using. It's called pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, or PGD. Now, this is a sophisticated medical procedure that's used with in vitro fertilization, or IVF. After eggs are fertilized in a lab, they grow into embryos. PGD allows doctors to screen those embryos for specific genetic markers before they are transferred to the uterus. Typically, parents use this technology to avoid passing on serious, life-threatening genetic diseases. It gives them a chance to select an embryo that is free from a condition that might run in their family. It's powerful stuff. But here's where Andre and Leslie's story turns that entire concept on its head. They aren't looking to screen out a genetic trait, they're looking to screen in one. They want to use PGD to identify an embryo that carries the gene for deafness. They see this not as choosing a disability, but as choosing a cultural identity. For them, deafness isn't just about the inability to hear sound, it's about a connection to a community. It's the key that unlocks a world they cherish. They believe that if they have a deaf child, they can be the best possible parents to that child, sharing a language and a lived experience from the very first moment. Think about it from their perspective for a second. They imagine raising a child who communicates with them effortlessly in American Sign Language, their native tongue. They picture sharing stories, jokes, and deep emotional conversations without a communication barrier. They know they can guide a deaf child through the challenges of a hearing-centric world because they've walked that path themselves. They can be more than just parents. They can be mentors, advocates, and living proof that a deaf life is a full and rewarding life. This desire comes from a place of deep, profound love. It isn't about limiting their child, it's about connecting with them on the most fundamental level they know. Of course, this is where the conflict kicks in. Part of them knows the world isn't always kind. They face the frustrations, the misunderstandings, and the outright prejudice that can come with being deaf. They've had to fight for access, for respect, and for basic communication. And so they ask themselves, is it fair to choose this path for their child, knowing the struggles that might lie ahead? This isn't just a medical decision for them, it's an emotional and ethical tug of war. Their hearts are telling them one thing about connection and culture, but their minds are reminding them of the harsh realities of the world outside their front door. This whole situation puts a spotlight on a big idea from the world of philosophy, something called the principle of procreative beneficence. That's a mouthful, I know. But the philosopher Julian Savulescu basically argued that parents have a moral obligation to choose the child of the possible children they could have, who is expected to have the best life. In other words, if you have the power to select for traits that will lead to a better life and more well-being, you should use it. This principle is often used to argue against choosing an embryo with a trait like deafness, because some people assume that being able to hear automatically leads to a better, easier life. But hold on a minute. Who gets to decide what a best life looks like? That's where this gets complicated. Philosopher Elizabeth Barnes challenges this head-on. She talks about the difference between a bad difference view and a mere difference view of disability. The bad difference view is the one most people default to. It says that having a disability, like deafness, is intrinsically bad and makes your life worse, period. It's a state of being that is less valuable than being able-bodied. So, from this perspective, choosing deafness for a child would be morally wrong, because you are deliberately choosing a worse life for them. It seems pretty clear-cut if you look at it that way, but Andre and Leslie and many in the deaf community operate from a mere difference view. They would argue that deafness isn't inherently bad at all. It's just different. It's a different way of being in the world with its own unique set of experiences, joys and challenges. From this viewpoint, a deaf person's life isn't automatically worse than a hearing person's life. It's just lived on a different plane of existence. The richness of deaf culture, the beauty of sign language, and the deep bonds within the community are all positive values that a hearing person might never experience. They aren't less than, they are simply other. So when you ask if Andre and Leslie are choosing a worse life for their child, the answer depends entirely on which view you take. Is a life with deafness a broken version of a hearing life, or is it a whole and complete life in its own right? The mere difference argument says that many of the problems associated with deafness don't come from deafness itself. Instead, they come from living in a society that is designed by and for hearing people. The barriers are external: lack of interpreters, inaccessible media, social stigma, not internal. Andre and Leslie believe that if they can give their child the tools to navigate that world, then deafness is not a barrier to a wonderful life. Let's dig deeper into this idea of culture. For Andre and Leslie, being deaf isn't just a medical diagnosis, it's a passport to a vibrant, thriving community. Think about the unique experiences they have. The silent applause of waving hands in the air at a performance, the expressive and nuanced storytelling that exists only in sign language, the immediate sense of belonging when they meet another deaf person. This is a world with its own history, its own heroes, and its own art forms. They believe that raising a deaf child would be an act of cultural preservation, passing down a beautiful heritage that they fear could be lost if everyone chooses to fix deafness. The philosopher Robert Sparrow has made an argument that touches on this very point. He suggests that parents might actually be better parents to children who share their fundamental cultural identity. He calls this the parental fit argument. Think about it. Andre and Leslie are experts in the deaf experience. They can anticipate their child's needs, advocate for them effectively, and provide them with role models and a community that affirms their identity from birth. If they had a hearing child, they would love that child unconditionally, of course, but they worry about the communication gaps and the cultural divide that might exist between them. Could they truly prepare a hearing child for a hearing world they've only ever observed from the outside? Now, this is where a lot of people get uncomfortable. The critics, like the disability studies scholar Adrian Ash, raise a powerful warning. If we say it's okay for deaf parents to choose a deaf child, what's to stop other people from making other choices? What about parents choosing a child's gender, eye color, or even intelligence? This opens a Pandora's box of designer babies and risks turning children into products that parents customize to their own preferences. More importantly, critics argue that selecting for deafness sends a dangerous message that devalues the lives of people with disabilities. It seems to reinforce the idea that it's okay for some people to live with limitations, which could undermine the broader fight for inclusion and equality. But there's a counter-argument to that as well. Some might say that Andre and Leslie, by wanting to pass on their culture, are doing something similar to what parents from other minority cultures do all the time. Parents who speak a minority language often hope their children will speak it too, to keep the culture alive. Andre and Leslie see sign language and deaf identity in the same light. They aren't trying to create a perfect child based on societal standards. In fact, they are rejecting a mainstream standard, the ability to hear, in favor of a standard that has deep personal and cultural meaning for them. This makes the decision incredibly complex, with valid, heartfelt arguments on all sides. So, we've looked at the science, the ethics, and the culture. But it all comes down to this. What is the fundamental role of a parent? Is it to engineer the best possible child, or is it to unconditionally love and accept the child they are given? Andre and Leslie are caught right in the middle of this question. On one hand, the principle of procreative beneficence pushes them to give their child every advantage, which some would argue includes the ability to hear. Choosing against deafness could be seen as an act of love, an attempt to shield their child from the very prejudice and inaccessibility that they have personally experienced throughout their lives. This path would mean consciously choosing a hearing child. They would be giving their child access to the dominant culture, potentially sparing them a lifetime of fighting for accommodations. It's a powerful argument. Why wouldn't you want to make your child's life easier if you could? Maybe the most loving act is to give them the one thing you never had. This decision would require Andre and Leslie to parent across a cultural divide, to learn how to navigate the hearing world from a new perspective, and to accept that their child's life experience would be fundamentally different from their own. It's a path of sacrifice, but one that could be framed as being for the child's ultimate benefit. On the other hand, there's the argument for acceptance, not just accepting a child who happens to be deaf, but embracing deafness as a positive identity worth choosing. This view challenges the very idea that parents should be in the business of controlling their children's genetic makeup at all. Maybe the real job of a parent is not to eliminate challenges, but to give their child the strength and support to meet them. By choosing a deaf child, Andre and Leslie would be making a powerful statement. Your life, just as it is valuable. Your identity is something to be celebrated, not cured. They would be choosing connection and shared culture over conformity to a mainstream ideal. In the end, there is no easy answer for Andre and Leslie, and there's no playbook for this. Their decision forces us to confront our deepest biases about what makes a life good. Does a good life mean a life with the fewest obstacles, or does it mean a life with a strong sense of identity and belonging? Should parents use technology to shape their children into what they think is best? Or is the greatest gift a parent can give the radical acceptance of their child, no matter who they turn out to be? This is a choice between control and acceptance, between shaping a future and embracing the unknown. And for Andre and Leslie, it's the most important choice they will ever make.